Okay, so if we go to the slides, let's see here. So, first, remember, you'll be typing your test in a Google Doc, which you'll upload to Schoology. So make sure you have your Chromebooks and bring your chargers in case you need to charge during the test. I'm recording this with, what is this, Block D? So Block D, your final is on Monday, December 12th. And it's 11:15 to 12:45 with extended time in the classroom until 1:30. So if you qualify for extended time, you would already know that. And then you can reference this for the other finals if you need to. So here's all the study aids. The Quizlet and the Kahoots are just for you to find definitions of the vocabulary words you might want to use. There's no objective questions on the test. You're only writing for the final. This is a link to all the readings. So if you were, there were concepts that you wanted to cover, but you couldn't remember, like you're like, I don't remember what the hierarchy of goods is. You can find all the readings on one Google Doc. So hopefully that's easier for you. And then I will, any of the sessions of the review that I record, I'll post them here. So this is a term that this should have come up when we went over the last lesson on sin, but I don't know why it wasn't in the PowerPoint. But it's really important for this film. It's also going to be important for second semester. So this is the concept called social sin. So this is the definition from the Catechism. Sin makes men accomplices of one another and causes concupiscence, violence, and injustice to reign among them. Sin gives rise to social situations and institutions that are contrary to divine goodness. Structures of sin are the expression and the effect of personal sins. They lead their victims to do evil in their turn, and in an analogous sense, they constitute a social sin. So a key term in this definition is the idea of structures of sin. Structures of sin are present in our laws, our cultural customs, our financial systems, and our business practices. So common examples of social sin that we see are racism, war, abortion, death penalty, and in the case of the film, the social sin we see is poverty. So what happens with social sin is we have individual sins, right? Like, so for example, racism or prejudice against someone who's not the same race as you, that would be a personal sin. So if you harbor hatred in your heart for people of different races, that would be a personal sin. But what ends up happening is if you get a group of people together who share this same sin, they create social structures in our society that perpetuate that sin. So for example, Jim Crow laws. So Jim Crow laws were created by individuals who came together and basically wrote their personal sin of racism into the structures of our society. And we see that in the film in the example of poverty. And this is where you can bring in the law if it's applicable in your whatever you want to write. So in the film, the situation, the poverty in Victorian England, there's two kind of legal things that cause the situation we see in the film. I guess I could do this one first. So the Suppression of Religious Houses Act of 1535, it was actually part of King Henry's Act of Supremacy. And remember we learned about that with St. Thomas More. What happened was when King Henry dissolved England's relationship with the Catholic Church, the government took all of the church's lands and properties and monasteries and seized some of that wealth for the government, and then it sold it to the properties to Henry's friends. But the unintended consequence that they didn't really think about was historically the Christian church, which is the Catholic Church, provided a lot of the social safety nets that are provided by government today. And so when they closed the monasteries, it was the church that was feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and educating the orphans. So they ended up having this vacuum where they didn't have any social services to take care of the poor. So they began enacting what are called the Poor Laws. And you can see there's the Poor Laws of 1388, 1576, 1601. In this one right here, the New Poor Law of 1834, that's the law that was in place in A Christmas Carol. And what the New Poor Law of 1834 did was it created the Victorian workhouse system. And so in the film, when we saw the poor family saying they don't want to go to the workhouse, it was this law that created the workhouses, and those are essentially prisons for being poor. You go to prison for being poor, and you can't get out of the workhouse because they don't pay you. So we would, as Catholics, we would call that a structure of sin, because it's a way in which the social structure of Victorian English society set up structures that put poverty in place and kind of made the problem of poverty even worse. So that's what social sin is, and that's how and some of the sins in the film are really like they're personal sins, but there's also social sin that's setting up the structures that perpetuate the poverty we see in the film. So our prompts, you will be given 2 on the day of the final, and you'll pick only 1 to write about. And so remember, prompts 1, 2, and 4, they're kind of looking at the same idea in slightly different ways. So explore the ways in which the character of Ebenezer Scrooge changes over the course of the film. Number 2, A Christmas Carol shows goodness and love defeating self-interest. Discuss this statement. And number 4, A Christmas Carol has been described as a tale of moral redemption. Discuss this statement. So as you can see, the strategy for answering those 3 questions is pretty much the same for each, maybe with slightly different focus. So we'll look at that. How much time do I have? 10 minutes? 8 minutes? Okay. We'll look at those first, and then we'll look at the other 2. So remember, it's a full essay. You need an introduction. You need a conclusion. The suggestion here is to have 1 paragraph focusing on the topics for each unit. You don't necessarily have to do that. As long as you cover, you show that you can connect something from each unit in your paper. If you don't like this outline, you don't necessarily have to use it. This is just provided for you to help people who are struggling with how to start. Because sometimes starting writing is the hardest part. If you're worried about your time, I would do like the body first, then do your introduction and conclusions last. So questions 1, 2, and 4 all deal with the idea of how Scrooge changes over the course of the film. So I'll put the pictures of the whiteboard that we just saw up here. I'll put them in here, but I'm going to type our notes for today in here. So I gotta exit this. Hang on. Sorry. So for this question, let me. Hang on. Let me see if I do this. Oh, that did the opposite. Hang on. Oh man, I messed that up. Shoot, what did I do? Sorry. It's really weird. Okay, so for 1, 2, and 4, all those questions are kind of looking at the change in Scrooge over the course of the film. So the first thing you would want to do is say, what was Scrooge as a person like before? So what would you guys say? What was he like? Yeah, so he's selfish. We can give an example of that. For example, when he raised the price of corn, and the men who were the men at the stock exchange said, no, you can't do that. It's going to hurt the poor. And he's like, so what? He's like, it's just business. He also refused to give to the philanthropist, Phil, who wanted money for the poor. He won't buy coal to heat the office. Let's see. So those are some examples you could give to show that he's selfish. What else? What else would you say about him? Before he's selfish. We could say that he's lonely and isolated. He won't go to Christmas. Won't go to Christmas with his nephew. How do you spell nephew? And all right, okay. He also didn't support Marley when he was dying. So he doesn't go to Christmas with his nephew. He doesn't support Marley when he's dying. You could say he lives alone as well. And in terms of bringing in like the moral analysis, when we look at Scrooge's character, you can compare Scrooge with what we know about human nature. So, hang on, let me. Whoops, sorry, let me move these up. So when you're talking about what he was like as a person before, you can say like, what do we know about human nature that helps us understand Scrooge as a person? For example, we can talk about the fact that he's so lonely that leads to his unhappiness because it's part of human nature to be in relationship with others. You could also bring in about the levels of happiness. Part of his unhappiness is because he's like focused on just money and not as a means to an end, but as the ultimate good, which it can't. That's why it can't be, so it doesn't make him happy. So it's time to go. We'll continue reviewing next class, and we'll also be adding to these slides as I review with the other classes. So yeah, and we'll have all class next class review as well. Sound good? Okay, thank you.